The drive took longer than I expected. As I left the city and ventured into the rural areas, I was so exhausted I could barely keep my eyes open. My Uncle Henry's farm was far away from the noise of the city, nestled at the edge of a dense forest. He had been inviting me for months, needing help with the growing work around the farm as he got older, and perhaps hoping I'd find some peace away from my hectic city life. My dog Rusty lay curled up in the back seat, sleeping most of the drive, so he still had plenty of energy. But all I could think about was collapsing into bed. When we finally pulled up to the farm, I decided I'd walk him in the morning. Uncle Henry and Aunt Carol greeted me warmly. Uncle Henry had aged significantly, his back slightly hunched, his hair now completely white. The farmhouse was old but warm, nestled among wide-open fields and rolling hills. After dinner, I went straight to bed, utterly exhausted. Rusty lay down beside me, resting his nose on my leg. I felt guilty for not taking him out for a proper walk, but I promised him a long one in the morning. Around midnight, I woke to Rusty's low growl. He was staring at the door, his hackles raised. I rubbed my eyes, trying to figure out what was going on. Then I realized Rusty wanted to go outside. "Sorry, boy," I whispered. "Let's get this over with." I grabbed my jacket and his leash. The moment I stepped outside, the chill of the night air hit me. The only light came from the dim porch lamp, the rest of the world swallowed by the pitch-black night. Rusty eagerly pulled me toward the edge of the forest. His energy surprised me, but I kept my eyes on the surroundings. It was eerily silent. No wind, no sounds from the woods. I wanted to get the walk over with and go back inside as soon as possible. And then I saw it. A movement in the shadows along the tree line. I froze. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I had the distinct feeling of being watched. There was a shape, something, or someone lurking between the trees. Before I could focus on it, it disappeared. My heart raced. Rusty had sensed my fear, and he started to whine, his tail tucked between his legs. "Let's go," I muttered, picking up the pace. We hurried back to the house, my pulse pounding in my ears. Once inside, I locked the door, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Just a trick of the light, maybe my tired mind playing games with me. I didn't tell Uncle Henry or Aunt Carol. I didn't want to sound paranoid or foolish, especially on my first night. The next morning, everything seemed normal. In the daylight, my fears from the previous night felt silly, like a bad dream. I shook it off, telling myself it was just the exhaustion getting to me, but the feeling didn't go away. As the days passed, that sense of being watched lingered. One afternoon, I decided to explore the cornfield behind the farmhouse. The stalks rose high above me, their dense rows blocking out the sky. As I reached the edge of the field, that feeling hit me again, an unsettling awareness of unseen eyes. I froze, and then, through the thick rows of corn, I saw movement. A figure, a shadowy shape slipping between the stalks, too fast to clearly make out. I didn't wait. My heart pounding, I turned and hurried back to the house, trying to rationalize what I had seen. Maybe it was just someone working in the field, maybe the wind, but the fear gnawed at me, deep and persistent. Still, I told no one. Who would believe me? Someone's watching me from the cornfield sounded ridiculous, even to me. But the feeling remained, clinging to me even in the daylight. And then one night, everything changed. I was lying in bed, struggling to fall asleep, when I heard a faint noise coming from the kitchen. At first, I thought it was just Rusty shifting in his sleep, but then I heard it again, a soft tapping sound. I threw off the covers and tiptoed down the hall. When I reached the kitchen, my blood turned to ice. There was a man standing outside the window, his face pressed against the glass, his breath fogging it up. His hand was tapping slowly, tap, 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 against the window. His mouth moved as if he was whispering something, but I couldn't hear him. His eyes, they were cold, empty, staring not at me, but through me. I screamed. The man jerked back and disappeared into the night. My heart was hammering in my chest as Uncle Henry and Aunt Carol rushed in, asking what had happened. I was shaking, barely able to get the words out as I told them everything. The man at the window, the tapping, his eerie whispering. Uncle Henry let out a heavy sigh. "Oh, that's just Crazy Pete. He's harmless. He's a strange old man who lives out in the woods around here. A bit odd, but he won't hurt you." But that face I saw at the window, those lifeless eyes, they were burned into my mind. I wanted to believe he was harmless, but the memory of those cold eyes and the sound of his tapping haunted me. I tried to forget that moment, tried to tell myself it was just a bizarre, isolated event, but deep down, I knew the watcher in the shadows was still out there. The farm had always been a quiet place. Nestled deep in the countryside, miles away from the nearest town, it was surrounded by endless fields and dense woods. It was the kind of place where the nights were so still that even the softest whisper could carry for miles. I grew up here, and for most of my life it was a place of peace. But as I got older, things began to change. It was late autumn when I first noticed it. The days were getting shorter, and the air had that unmistakable chill that signaled winter's approach. I had inherited the farm after my parents passed, and though I had always been fond of it, running the place on my own was no easy easy task. The silence, which I once found comforting, had begun to feel oppressive. I was alone, with nothing but the occasional sound of the wind rustling through the trees to keep me company. Or at least, I thought I was alone. It started with small things you could easily dismiss if you weren't paying attention. I'd walk into the barn in the morning to find tools out of place, or doors slightly ajar that I was sure I had closed the night before. At first, I chalked it up to my own forgetfulness. Running a farm is exhausting work, and after a long day, it's easy to overlook the little things. But then, it became harder to ignore. One evening, just as the sun was setting, I was in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner. The windows looked out over the yard, and as I glanced up, I saw a shadow move near the edge of the barn. It was quick, just a fleeting glimpse, but I knew I had seen something. I stepped outside, my heart pounding in my chest, but there was nothing there. The barn door creaked slightly in the breeze, and the field stretched out into the distance, empty and still. I told myself it was probably just an animal, a stray dog or a deer maybe. But the next morning, I found fresh footprints in the dirt near the barn. They were faint, but unmistakable. Someone had been there. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe one of the neighboring farmers had come by, though I couldn't imagine why. The next few days passed without incident, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The farm didn't feel the same anymore. Every time I stepped outside, I had the unsettling sense that I was being watched. I would catch movement out of the corner of my eye, only to turn and see nothing but empty fields. One night, I woke up to a strange noise. It was a soft, steady tapping sound, like someone gently knocking on the window. I sat up in bed, straining to hear. The house was silent except for that rhythmic tap, tap, tap. My heart raced as I slowly got out of bed and made my way to the window. The yard was shrouded in darkness, but I could just make out a figure standing near the barn. My breath caught in my throat. Whoever it was, they were standing completely still, facing the house. I watched for what felt like hours, my mind racing with possibilities. Who was it? What did they want? I didn't dare move, didn't even blink, until finally the figure turned and disappeared into the night. The next morning, I found more footprints leading from the barn to the house. They stopped right beneath my bedroom window. That was when I knew I couldn't stay here alone any longer. I called the local sheriff, hoping they could provide some explanation, anything to make sense of what had been happening. They came out to the farm, walked around for a bit, and told me it was probably just someone passing through. Maybe a drifter, they said. These old farms attract all sorts of people, but I wasn't convinced. I had lived on this farm my whole life, and I had never seen anyone pass through like that. The sheriff left, and for a while things seemed to settle down, but the unease remained. Every night, I locked all the doors and windows, double-checking everything before I went to bed, and every night I lay awake, listening for the faintest sound. Then one night, it happened again. This time, the sound wasn't a tapping. It was a loud, scraping noise, like something heavy being dragged across the ground. I shot out of bed, my heart pounding in my ears. The noise was coming from outside, near the barn. I grabbed a flashlight and cautiously made my way outside. The air was cold, and the wind whispered through the trees, but I heard it again, that scraping sound. I shone the flashlight toward the barn and froze. The barn door was wide open, and inside, I could see someone moving. I stepped closer, my hand trembling as I held the light. Whoever it was, they were dragging something across the floor. I shouted, and the figure stopped. For a moment, there was complete silence, and then, without warning, the figure bolted. I watched as they disappeared into the woods, moving faster than I thought possible. I ran into the barn, the flashlight beam bouncing wildly as I searched for what they had been dragging. In the corner, I found an old sack, filled with tools and supplies that had been stolen from the farm over the past few weeks. They had been coming back, night after night, taking whatever they could. I never found out who it was, or why they had targeted my farm. The sheriff said it was probably just a thief, someone looking for an easy target, but deep down, I knew it was more than that. Whoever it was, they had been watching me, waiting for the right moment.